The record left behind in the Northern Archives does not speak in full sentences, only fragments, shattered formations, a sky torn open, and the name Ling Han written in ink that seems to burn through the page. What transpired in the last clash was no ordinary exchange of blows. It was the moment when hidden strength surfaced and long-buried intentions began to stir. Now, as we enter, Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Dao Chapter 1643, Chapter 1644, the aftermath refuses to settle. Allies measure their loyalty against ambition. Enemies regroup with colder resolve, and Ling Han stands at the center, no longer just a participant, but a force others must reckon with. Yet the question lingers like a blade at the throat. In reaching further into power, what has he awakened that cannot be put back to rest? The next turn of fate is already in motion, and it will not wait for anyone to be ready. A thunderous shout suddenly shattered the air, echoing through the passage like a blade striking stone. The voice belonged to a middle-aged man, sharp and domineering. Yet the moment it rang out, the surrounding crowd fell into an uneasy silence. Their expressions twisted with awkwardness, as if they had just witnessed someone step willingly into a storm of death. These onlookers were no fools. They recognized the two figures at once. The elder was Tong Yi, and beside him stood the younger Tong Wenzong, members of the Tong clan, a force whose name carried weight across countless stars. Their clan ancestor had already reached the consummate level of the eternal river tier 100 million years ago, a veteran among the old monsters of the cosmos. And yet, who was the young man standing before them? Ling Han, a saint. In the presence of a saint, even a consummate eternal river tier expert was nothing more than dust beneath the wind. To raise one's voice so arrogantly towards such a figure was no different from knocking on the gates of death. Brother Tong Yi, how can you be so disrespectful to this lord? Apologize at once, someone urgently called out. The speaker was clearly Tong Yi's acquaintance. Otherwise, who would dare step forward and risk being implicated in the fury of a saint? Lord? Tong Yi shot him a sideways glance, his heart brimming with disdain. Since when did you start calling someone like this a lord? He's barely more than a youth. Even reaching the heavenly body tier at such an age would already be heaven-defying fortune. And you dare call him a lord? His lips curled into a cold sneer. What lord? He injured a member of my Tong clan. Even if he were a god, he would have to bow his head and apologize. How dare you? A figure leapt forward like a bolt of lightning. It was Yang Ming, his eyes blazing with fury. Tong Yi's expression froze. Yi Yang Ming? He might not recognize others, but Yang Ming was a name etched across the younger generation like a blazing star. His reputation stretched across galaxies, and everyone knew he was destined to rise into the eternal river tier. Such a figure demanded respect. Today, he could still be addressed as Brother Yang, but in the future, he would be hailed as Lord Yang. Apologize, now. Yang Ming's voice was cold as iron. Even he had been forced to kneel and beg forgiveness before Ling Han. Who did Tong Yi think he was? Tong Yi's heart began to pound wildly. Even Yang Ming was speaking this way? Could it be? This young man was no ordinary figure. A terrifying thought surfaced. Could he be the son of a saint? Only such a possibility could explain Yang Ming's urgency. Even the descendant of an eternal river tier elite would not warrant such fear. His face drained of color, fear creeping into his bones like frost. Meanwhile, Ling Han merely smiled faintly, as if the entire scene were nothing more than a passing breeze. He nodded calmly toward Long Yushan and Long Shangyue, then, holding the hand of the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, walked forward into the passageway without another word. Tong Yi stood rooted in place, not daring to breathe too loudly. Only after Ling Han and his group vanished completely did he finally exhale, his voice trembling. Brother Yang, who was that? Yang Ming let out a cold snort. That person is a saint. Pu Tong Yi choked violently, coughing as though struck by thunder. His eyes widened in disbelief. That's impossible. He's so young. How could he be a saint? Yang Ming's gaze turned icy. You'd better think carefully about how you're going to beg for forgiveness. Otherwise, not only you, but your entire Tong clan may be wiped out. These were not empty words. If a saint's wrath was stirred, heaven and earth themselves would tremble. Even if Ling Han did not act personally, countless forces would rush forward to curry favor with him. Against a coalition of eternal river tier powers, what was the Tong clan? They would be erased in a single night, leaving no trace behind. With a flick of his sleeve, Yang Ming departed, leaving only dread in his wake. The earlier acquaintance who had tried to warn Tong Yi also turned and left without hesitation. He had already done his part. There was no reason to stake his life alongside a doomed clan. Seventh great-grandfather, what do we do now? Tong Wenzong asked, his voice trembling with despair. What do we do? Tong Yi suddenly exploded in rage, his fear turning into fury. Slap after slap landed heavily across Tong Wenzong's face. You little bastard! If you wanted to die, you should have died alone. Why drag the entire clan into this? Tong Wenzong broke down in tears. How could he have known that such a young man was actually a saint? Even their ancient ancestor would have to kneel in reverence before such a being. Yet for Ling Han, this episode was nothing more than a fleeting ripple in a vast ocean. He had already forgotten it entirely. As he continued forward through the passage, a subtle shift occurred. At a certain point, his body felt heavy, as though passing through an invisible barrier. The world itself seemed to transform in an instant. The most immediate change was the spiritual qi. It surged like a boundless tide. The density here was more than 100 times greater than the outside world. Cultivating in such an environment would accelerate the accumulation of origin power to an unimaginable degree. Even saints would reap tremendous benefits. So this is why the saints never returned. Ling Han murmured inwardly. As long as their origin power had not reached its limit, staying here was far more advantageous. The notionless saint drew in a sharp breath, his eyes filled with astonishment. I have traveled across countless worlds, yet nowhere compares to this place. This level of spiritual qi, it defies belief. Even a veteran saint like him was shaken. Proof enough of how extraordinary this land truly was. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden nodded lightly. If this realm does not close, one could cultivate all the way to the great saint tier before leaving. Ling Han's gaze swept across the horizon. Mountains rose endlessly in every direction, their peaks piercing the heavens. From outside they had seemed ordinary, but now, within this realm, their true scale was revealed. They stretched upward without end, beyond the reach of sight. Even with the divine sense of saints, their summits remained unseen, an impossibility. Normally, their divine sense could envelop entire planets, yet here, even a single mountain resisted their perception. These mountains, the notionless saint said slowly, are not merely vast. There is a mysterious force suppressing our divine sense. Indeed, within this realm, their awareness was greatly restricted. It was as if they had regressed to the shattering void tier, their perception limited to the span of a mere city. The five of them rose into the sky, attempting to gain a broader view, but once they reached a certain height, an immense pressure descended upon them, like the weight of the heavens themselves. Even saints could only ascend to about 1,000 miles. Ling Han, with his extraordinary strength, managed to push further, over 3,000 miles, but compared to the towering mountains, it was insignificant. As for Long Shangwei, she could only endure a little over 100 miles before the pressure became unbearable. Reluctantly, they descended back to the ground. Ling Han exchanged glances with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint. In each other's eyes, they saw the same realization. This place, could it be a fragment of the celestial realm that fell? Aside from the celestial realm, what place in the ancient realm could possess such dense spiritual qi? What force could suppress saints so completely? During the ancient upheaval, even celestial kings had battled fiercely. If a portion of that higher realm had been torn apart and cast down, such a phenomenon would not be impossible. Ling Han's eyes gleamed with excitement. If that's the case, there may be countless saintly medicines here, perhaps even celestial medicines. In the celestial realm, such treasures were far from rare. Given the sheer size of this place, the rewards could be unimaginable. Celestial realm? Long Yushan asked, confusion written across her face. Ling Han paused, gathering his thoughts. In our world, there exists a higher layer of existence, though it's not quite separate. The celestial realm is actually still part of the ancient realm, but... He frowned slightly, then began explaining its origins in detail. As his words unfolded, Long Yushan and Long Shangyue stood frozen, their minds shaken. This was a realm they had never even heard of, and yet, could Ling Han possibly fabricate such a tale? Moreover, the overwhelming spiritual chi surrounding them left no room for doubt. Suddenly, Long Shangyue staggered, her body swaying. Long Yushin quickly caught her. What's wrong? For a moment, she wondered if the revelation had been too shocking, but Long Shangyue shook her head weakly. The spiritual chi, it's too dense. My body feels uncomfortable. The energy of this land was not only a blessing, but also a trial, a realm of boundless opportunity and unseen danger. The air within this realm was thick, so thick that even a seasoned cultivator of the eternal river tier would feel their meridians strain under its weight. Spiritual chi surged like an endless tide, pressing against the body from all directions. It was excessive to the point of absurdity, as though heaven itself had condensed its essence into this single place. The two women of the Long tribe stood frozen, their minds still reeling from the revelations they had just uncovered. Shock lingered in their eyes, their thoughts tangled and unsettled. Meanwhile, Ling Han and his companions did not linger in hesitation. They pressed forward. Now that they had stepped into the Saint realm, cultivation was no longer bound by time or stillness. Every breath they took drew in torrents of spiritual chi, refining it into origin power within their bodies. Deep inside them, stars flickered to life, some expanding, others forming anew from the void, like galaxies being born in silence. Yet the world around them was eerily quiet. A dense forest stretched endlessly in every direction, its towering trees cloaked in stillness. There were no beasts, no chirping insects, not even the whisper of life beyond the rustling leaves. It felt less like a living world, and more like a realm abandoned by all creatures, leaving only vegetation to thrive in unnatural peace. With no clear path ahead, they chose the simplest course: ascend. They would climb toward the mountain's peak and uncover its secrets from above. Time passed. Half a day slipped by, yet the summit remained distant, still looming far above them like an unreachable dream. The deeper they climbed, the heavier the pressure became. It pressed down on their bodies and spirits alike, as though the mountain itself was testing their worth. Even Ling Han and the others felt the strain. Long Shangyue fared the worst. Sweat soaked her robes, her breath grew uneven, and her steps faltered. Still, her pride refused to yield. She clenched her teeth and forced herself forward, unwilling to ask for rest. But Long Yushan saw through her stubbornness. Without a word, she waved her hand and drew Long Shangyue into her spatial god tool. It was a silent act of care, because continuing like this would only drag the entire group down. Ling Han said nothing. He simply continued walking ahead, his pace steady. Then his heart tightened. A sudden sense of danger exploded within him. Without hesitation, Ling Han turned and struck out with a palm, his power descending toward Long Yushan. "What are you doing?" she snapped, startled. Though caught off guard, her instincts as a saint were sharp. She raised her arm to block, but even so, she was blasted backward over 30 meters. And that was with Ling Han holding back. Had he used his full strength, the power of a mid-stage Saint King, Long Yushan would have been obliterated in a single strike. Ling Han offered no explanation. He didn't need to. Boom! A dark shadow burst forth from the void, lunging at the spot where Long Yushan had just stood. Humph! The notionless saint moved instantly. With a flash of cold light, he drew a treasured saber and slashed toward the shadow. The blade gleamed with power. It had been forged from saintly material gifted by Ling Han himself, one of the many treasures taken from the Heavenly River King's vault and distributed among allies. Now, infused with years of nurturing and martial intent, the saber had become a true saint tool. As it swung, Dao patterns ignited along its edge, radiating a terrifying aura. The shadow reacted swiftly. Missing its initial strike, it lashed out with a claw. Bang! A thunderous collision echoed. The shadow was knocked back, but so too was the notionless saint, who staggered over 20 steps before stabilizing himself. Ling Han's eyes flickered with surprise. The force of their clash had shattered nearby vegetation into dust, yet the mountain itself remained completely unscathed. This land was far more solid than it appeared. Long Yushan's expression darkened. She now understood. Ling Han had struck her earlier to save her life, but her pride held firm. No apology left her lips. Instead, her gaze locked onto the attacker. It emerged fully now, a black panther. Its body was lean, about 3 meters long and 1.5 meters tall, but its tail stretched an astonishing 9 meters. At its tip swayed a snake's head, its forked tongue flicking in and out with a sinister hiss. Which was the true head? No one could tell. Humph! Long Yushin charged. Dragon blood surged within her veins, igniting her fighting spirit. Her fist shot forward, transforming into the phantom of a dragon's head. A mighty roar echoed as her strike carried the authority of a true dragon. Dragons ruled the 9 heavens. Their presence suppressed countless beasts, yet this panther showed no fear. Instead, it seemed enraged. It bared its fangs, long, gleaming, etched with intricate patterns like those of St. Tool's. With explosive force, it lunged. Its speed shattered limits, becoming almost impossible to track. Pooh! A claw struck out, glowing with patterns as it tore through Long Yushan's attack like paper. It surged forward, jaws snapping toward her wrist. If it landed, her arm beat at that critical moment. Ling Han moved, lightning flashed. His speed surpassed even the beast's. He stepped in front of Long Yushan and extended his arm. Crunch! The panther's fangs sank into his wrist. Long Yushan gasped, her heart trembling. Moments ago, she had rebuked him. Yet he repaid her hostility with kindness, twice saving her, even at personal cost. Saints could regenerate limbs, yes, but such grace of character was far rarer. Emotion stirred within her, then turned into shock. The panther froze. Its fangs had failed. Not only had they failed, they trembled violently, blood seeping from its gums. Ling Han's wrist remained unbroken. Its teeth, as strong as saintly material, had nearly shattered instead. Long Yushan stared, utterly stunned. Was this man even human? Even among body cultivators, who could reach such a terrifying level? To block something akin to a Saint Tool strike with bare flesh and nearly destroy it in return? The Black Panther was equally shaken. Its fangs felt numb, as though they no longer belonged to it. Leaping back, it crouched low, eyes locked onto Ling Han with feral intensity. Strange, Ling Han murmured. This creature is clearly at the low extreme of the Genesis tier, yet it possesses no intelligence, only raw, bloodthirsty instinct. It was absurd. Even mountain river tier beasts could assume human form, let alone develop intelligence. But this one, it was powerful, yet mindless. The notionless saint nodded grimly. Indeed strange, but its strength is formidable. It stands at king tier among small saints. They had both tested it. A single exchange was enough. But what did such strength matter before Ling Han? He stepped forward. Boom! As his hand extended, countless stars manifested around him, forming the illusion of a newborn cosmos. The panther's fur stood on end. Fear seized it. Without hesitation, it turned to flee. But escape was impossible. In an instant, it was slammed to the ground, limbs splayed wide. It growled fiercely, still baring its fangs, its savage nature refusing to yield, even as it lay completely subdued beneath Ling Han's overwhelming power.